Did you know that as the Christmas season approaches, the number of incidences increases? Crimes, assaults, and robberies. Law enforcement agents report hundreds of crimes over the Christmas and New Year's holidays. What is this fact related to? For starters, the celebrations are accompanied by copious amounts of booze. So this is just a context of the story, so you will know better what and in which time this incident happens. So without wasting your precious time, let's get started with the story. Elle Edwards, 26, died on January 25, 2022, and her funeral was held at St. Nicholas Church in Wallasey, Merseyside. Several hundred people gathered to see the gorgeous young woman off on her final journey. The young woman's body was transported on a karate catapult, pulled by 4 white horses. The family's siblings were unable to comprehend her abrupt and ludicrous death, and the cold-blooded crime, which took place in full front of everyone, remained on the minds of worried individuals for quite some time. A man stopped in the parking lot of the Beacon Bar in Wallasey on Christmas Eve. The local restaurant had a distinct taste and was bustling with activity for hours. The visitor stared at the establishment's entrance. He believed that now was the best time to exact revenge. Many people's attention would be diverted in the days leading up to the festivities. This meant that if he carried out his plan, he would be able to escape undetected. When the target finally appeared on the horizon, he fired with satisfaction. The criminal started the automobile and fled the scene. On December 24, 2024, there was no indication of problems. The city's atmosphere was magical. Everyone was getting ready for the forthcoming holiday. The streets were not overcrowded. Some residents were actively browsing at stores to find missing things. Those who had not yet purchased gifts wandered through retail malls. However, the majority of individuals remained at home with their family. Christmas is a season for gatherings and comfortable company. The Edwards family was similarly caught up in the pre-holiday frenzy. Additionally, everyone was waiting for Lucy, one of the family's daughters, to spend the impending holidays with her family. The girl flew in from Dubai. Her sister Ella was particularly looking forward to Lucy's return. Despite the thousands of miles that separated them, they remained close in spirit. When the wonderful moment of meeting happened, the girls decided to meet up with pals at the neighborhood bar Beacon. They had a terrific time. They danced, sang, and laughed. It was calmer and more tranquil than ever before. However, the widespread mirth was interrupted by loud clapping. "Are they fireworks?" someone asked in the crowd. No, someone's lunacy ruined the celebratory environment. At 11:50 p.m., 12 gunshots were fired at the pub's entrance. The bullets struck 5 people, 4 men and 1 woman. Elle Edwards had 2 bullet wounds to the head. Someone who was familiar with her tried to give her artificial breathing, but it was ineffective. Ella's condition was deteriorating. The injuries were really severe. After phoning 911, ambulances arrived at the location of the shooting. After examining the victims, the medics reached a preliminary. The conclusion of the incident revealed that a 22-year-old sustained leg injuries, a 24-year-old was shot in the arm, and a 33-year-old man's wrist was hurt. Additionally, Ella, 26, and a 28-year-old man were both in critical condition, while sadly, a woman died on the route to the hospital after losing consciousness. Miss Edwards' injuries were severe, making it impossible for her to survive. Ella had spoken with her father just a few hours before the crime, as Tim Edwards subsequently recalled being busy with Christmas preparations when the police reported what had happened. It came as a huge shock to their family. Everyone who knew Ella struggled to believe the occurrence, given her young age and vibrant personality. Questions arose about ill-wishers within her entourage, capable of such an act. Elle Edwards was described as a stunningly attractive and pleasant young lady who worked as a beautician in a local salon and part-time as a dental assistant. Despite her youth, she was well established with a respectable income, very goal-oriented, and didn't rest on her laurels. Her magnetic personality attracted male attention, and her inner beauty shone through, fostering positive relationships even with difficult customers. Her love for beauty and makeup promised a bright future, but tragically, life took a different turn. The investigation into the attack revealed abrupt violence, with shell casings and bleeding victims left behind. Detectives speculated whether Ella was the intended target or a random victim. Interviews with family and friends portrayed Ella positively, with no enemies reported. While envy or jealousy seemed unlikely motives, conflict between criminal groups in the city raised suspicions. The authorities conducted interviews, obtained surveillance footage, and urged the public for information. Community meetings aimed to reassure citizens and gather evidence, eventually leading to volunteer efforts that yielded results. It was quickly determined that the attacker had departed the pub parking lot in a dark Mercedes. TV cameras also revealed that after pulling up to the institution, the offender waited for some time. Apparently, he was picking the most convenient time to attack when Elle and other young people were outside. He opened fire and swiftly got into his car and sped off. It was easy to determine the time of the crime and that the attacker was alone. However, it was impossible to tell where the intruder fled. Detectives went door to door interviewing residents in an attempt to identify the perpetrator. They detailed the vehicle and the circumstances surrounding the occurrence. The city streets were patrolled around the clock. The murdered girl's funeral took place on December 25th, despite it being Christmas Day. The venue of the victim's final funeral was closed in honor of the victim's memory and suffering. The Beacon Pub's proprietor published a comment on his social media website, expressing his support for Elle Edwards' family. On the same day, her father left flowers at the establishment's door, whispering, "My beautiful Elle, the light of my life, you will always be with us." Already on December 26th, 2 people were apprehended. They were a 19-year-old Rockferry resident and a 30-year-old trans male. The woman was arrested on charges of conspiring to commit a felony. 2 days later, another trans resident was arrested, a 31-year-old guy, also accused of conspiracy to commit a felony. At the time of his arrest, the 2 previous arrestees remained at the station. The detainees' names were not revealed due to a lack of direct evidence. All 3 were quickly released. The authorities were unable to substantiate their involvement in the crime. The residents were outraged by the rampant criminality and the police's inability to control it. As a result, the detectives had to give another statement. They stated that the inquiry would continue until the culprit was identified and punished. It was still considered that the shooting at the Beacon Pub was the result of a rivalry between local criminal groups, and the unfortunate Elle Edwards was viewed as a random victim. On December 30th, law enforcement stated that the 3 male victims had been released from the hospital, and the badly injured 28-year-old's health had finally returned to normal. On January 3, 2023, police stated that approximately 150 pieces of data were obtained throughout the inquiry. Among them was some crucial information. It was discovered that the gunshots fired by an unknown individual may have been intended for Jake Duffy and Kieran Seld. The lads were members of a local gang. The gang could not coexist in a territory where illegal narcotics are traded with a competing clan. According to information gathered from enclosed sources, the 2 were observed scuffling on December 23rd. Apparently, the 2 did not see the battle as a serious danger to their gang. As a result, the bandits decided to take a vacation in Mayak the following day. By their presence, they put the other visitors in the gunmen's sights. At the same time, video surveillance equipment allowed authorities to trace down the car in which the perpetrator fled the site of the crime. However, the intruder got ahead of the detectives. New Year's Eve proved to be as tumultuous as Christmas. The police station received a report of a fire near the Beacon Pub. When cops arrived at the area, they discovered a car that fit the description of the sought vehicle. Despite the vehicle being fully burned out, the analysis revealed its identification. Apparently, the offender was aware that the police were on the trail, so he lit fire to destroy the evidence. It was also feasible to determine that the car had been stolen. The total number of people implicated in Elle's murder was revealed on January 11th. Edwards climbed to 5. Detectives announced the arrest of a 22-year-old man and a 23-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman from Wirral. On January 13th, police announced the arrest of the shooter. he turned out to be Connor Chapman. Despite his youth, the youngster was well known to authorities and the criminal community. He had a long history of robberies, hooliganism, threatening behavior, and aggravated carjackings. The last crime was a big deal, with him making headlines in numerous newspapers. In the current instance, he faces multiple charges. At the same time, the 23-year-old lady in custody was freed on bail. The investigation continues. It turned out that on the afternoon of December 24th, there was a fight between two opposing factions. The cause is a region near a wooden church in Beechwood. The altercation was extremely violent, and no compromise was made. Chapman discovered that several of his opponents were enjoying Christmas Eve at a neighborhood business. Instead of spending his first Christmas away from prison in 4 years with his family, Connor chose retribution. So, Elle Edwards was indeed at the wrong place at the wrong time, and Chapman was not acting alone. Investigators discovered the identity of another defendant in the case. It was 20-year-old Thomas Waring. The individual was taken into custody. He was charged with possessing guns and helping a criminal. A search of Thomas's residence yielded considerable evidence for the investigation. It was a videotape from before the incident. It shows Connor taking up a rifle and claiming he was going to get even with someone. Following the shooting, the culprits hid the stolen automobile later in order to muddle the investigation. They called a cab using an assumed identity around 5 a.m. The crooks returned to the location where they had buried the Mercedes. They chose to remove the direct evidence in the case rather than waste time erasing traces. Connor Chapman's identity was criminalized from an early age. He was born in Birkenhead, Liverpool, and raised by his grandparents, as his parents abandoned him at a young age. Due to his inadequate studies, he dropped out of school just before his exams. Generally, Connor has always been a difficult child, with neither teachers nor relatives holding high expectations for him. Chapman's first crime, shoplifting, occurred at the age of 14. In 2016, he conducted a carjacking, followed by another theft combined with possession of a restricted drug in 2017. Chapman had been under police surveillance and subject to restraining orders for the previous 2 years. However, he was more than willing to break the rules and was eventually regarded as a threat to the community. In 2018, he breached the prohibition again by entering a restricted area while carrying a weapon and illegal substances. That same year, the public learned about him for the first time, and his lame justification for stealing an automobile became a local anecdote. At 18, Connor had no intention of staying on the straight and narrow. Last time, he stole an Audi when a patrolman observed the stolen car on the streets of the city. Chapman had no intention of following the officer's orders and hit the gas with all his power, starting a chase. Along the way, he committed numerous traffic infractions and ended up colliding with a curb, resulting in his apprehension. In his defense, he stated that he was expecting a buddy. At trial, the defense fought hard for Chapman's freedom, claiming he was under the influence of bad company and diagnosed with ADHD and various other mental illnesses. A private specialist issued this report during the trial, maintaining Connor's innocence. Consequently, he was sentenced to 8 months in juvenile prison and issued a driving ban upon release, a relatively light sentence for a serial offender, with 14 convictions for 30 criminal incidents. 6 months before the horrific occurrence at the Beacon pub, Connor faced another trial and received a 10-month prison sentence for being found in public with prohibited narcotics in his pocket. After serving his term, he was arrested for 5 additional charges. Chapman boasted about questionable accomplishments, stating he had spent more time in prison than outside by the age of 20, accumulating 19 convictions for 43 offenses. Before the incident at the Beacon pub, Chapman's trial began in the Liverpool Crown Court, with 12 members of the Edwards family participating. The prosecutor announced the charges against him, to which Chapman pleaded not guilty. He denied being caught on CCTV camera and offered vague explanations regarding the stolen vehicle. However, enough evidence was gathered to reveal his falsehoods during the 3 and 1-2-week experiment. The true motive for the shooting on December 24th at a local pub was rage and revenge, which Chapman couldn't manage. He didn't care who got in his way during the murder of Jake Duffy and Kieran Solkeld, members of a rival gang. Prior to this, he had obtained a Scorpion submachine gun capable of firing around 15 bullets in less than a second. Chapman drove to the beacon, conducting 3 hours of monitoring before firing the shot. Meanwhile, security camera footage showed Elle cheerfully interacting with her friends until she found herself close to Chapman's targets. Connor was only in the parking lot, his long brown hair visible on camera and his face concealed by a hood or balaclava. As he headed toward his car to flee, he fired 12 shots, inadvertently hitting Elle and causing her to fall on top of Sold. After the attack, Chapman planned to travel to Spain, but was apprehended by police at the airport. To conceal their tracks, Chapman and Waring set fire to the automobile and destroyed the weapon. However, traces of Connor's DNA were discovered on one of the cartridge casings, tying him to the atrocity. During the investigation of his home, red gloves were discovered, matching those seen on the pub's CCTV tape and containing his DNA. While awaiting punishment, both of his attack victims were in prison. Tim Edwards, Ellie's father, spoke before the jury began deliberating the judgment, expressing the pain of seeing his daughter die on CCTV footage. He hoped the ultimate verdict would be fair and that the offender would never again spend Christmas with his family. After 3 hours of deliberation, on July 7, 2023, Connor Chapman was sentenced to life in prison with a 48-year parole period. The Edwards family was relieved that the cold-blooded killer would be incarcerated for life. The trial established that the bar shooting resulted from a conflict between the Woodchurch and Beechwood estate gangs. Thomas Waring was also found guilty and sentenced to 9 years in prison. This contrasted with Chapman's minimal criminal experience, likely contributing to his short sentence. The public was outraged, as innocent persons were once again involved in criminal confrontations, and potentially deadly gang members received short prison terms. Courts' utilization of prohibitions as supplementary sanctions proved ineffective in ensuring public safety. Elle's death underscored the necessity for a revision of the current legislative framework and highlighted the issue of handgun availability. Following multiple such deaths in the county of Merseyside, the government allocated $350,000 to launch a trial initiative aimed at reducing gun crime. Tim Edwards also announced the creation of a fund to help victims of gun violence, emphasizing the need to minimize the number of firearms in the hands of individuals and criminal organizations. He expressed concern about the younger generation's normalization of carrying guns, stating that during his upbringing, such behavior was unheard of. In today's culture, everyone is quite vulnerable, as attacks can occur anywhere, as demonstrated by the Christmas Eve tragedy at the Beacon Pub in 2022. Subscribe for more chilling cases.